Now, it's been 40 years since British voters had a say in our membership of any form of the European Union. Back then, it was the European Economic Community. But as the Prime Minister conducts his renegotiation, forces are assembling on each side of the coming battle. And here's how things currently stand. David Cameron has pledged to hold an in-out referendum on the UK's membership of the EU by the end of 2017. The Prime Minister's been touring European capitals trying to convince fellow leaders to accept a change in the terms of Britain's EU membership, but he hasn't yet revealed his specific demands. The Electoral Commission will register one official campaign organisation for each side of the referendum debate. That'll have to abide by strict spending limits. But that hasn't stopped a variety of groups from springing up already. Today saw the launch of Vote Leave, a cross-party group dedicated to Brexit, which is supported by parliamentarians such as Kate Hoey of Labour and UKIP's Douglas Carswell. But some public supporters of Mr Carswell's party didn't get the memo. Millionaire UKIP donor Aaron Banks has already set up his own rival group, Leave.eu, which Nigel Farage has loosely aligned himself to. Next week, we'll see the launch of the cross-party campaign to have Britain remain in the EU, the imaginatively titled The In Campaign. Just to be clear, Labour activist Will Straw will lead the charge, with Conservative inners such as Damien Green taking a prominent role, where we're joined now by Robert Oxley, newly minted head of media for the group Vote Leave, and by Lucy Thomas, Deputy Director of the In Campaign. Welcome to both of you. First of all, Robert Oxley, this is a mess, isn't it? I mean, how many campaigns are there going to be confusing the voters?
Well, I don't think when the title is Vote Leave and the question is going to be whether you would like to leave or remain in the EU, it's going to be very confusing. We've put together a broad coalition of political MPs, businesses and those outside of the political world backing us, and I think they're the people who are going to put forward the views and the voices that are going to win this campaign and bring around the key set of voters that are actually needed to win the referendum.
Yes, but that's your campaign, but there's more than one campaign. There are two leading campaigns at the moment, all saying similar things, but still two separate organisations. Why?
Well, look, I think, good luck to Aaron Banks and the kind of the UKIP campaign that's there, but we are going to build a cross-party campaign which has, as you mentioned, MPs from all sides. It's going to put messages which are going to appeal to the electorate, and it will be obviously it'll be up to the Electoral Commission to make that judgment. But we think that articulating arguments about the cost of Brussels, in returning control so that EU law is no longer supreme over the UK law, that we're free to make our own trade deals. Those are the kind of messages that are going to win this referendum. It's a very close fight. It's going to be an interesting battle with Lucy on this one. Yes, but I do think that we're in the best position to make that case.
But at the moment, the fight is between two campaigns saying the same thing, rather than the fight against your actual opponents. I mean, how many members or registered supporters does your campaign have?
Well, look, we launched last night at 10 o'clock. We've had lots of supporters going there. We've got a cross-party basis, This is the start of a fight, and
sure.
But
why don't you just leave it to Leave.eu? They've got 175,000 supporters. Why not let them?
Well, look, let's just remember that Facebook likes are not the same thing as supporters. But what we're going to do is we're going to build that cross-party campaign that can actually win the fight. And it's Lucy and me here having this conversation. I think this is what's going to be repeated in the next 2 years.
Well, before we bring Lucy into the conversation, I mean, Aaron Banks, who is the sort of bankrolling the other campaign, says you're just a Westminster bubble. He's actually using the fact that you're a cross-party group of mainly parliamentarians against you.
Well, look, there's many business leaders backing us. There's people in the world from academia backing us. And frankly, it is going to be a party, a campaign, which is backed by all parties and none, which is going to win the referendum, and that's the kind of backing we already have.
How broad-based is it? I mean, how many supporters do you have from across the UK?
Well, look, we started last night.
But you'll know who's coming to support. You've got some names already there.
Yeah, we've already had thousands of people sign up as registered supporters of that. But what we're going to do is we're going to continue to build this. This is the start of a campaign. You've got a referendum potentially in 6 months, but more likely from what we're hearing from the government, they're trying to put it off because they know how badly the renegotiation is going. All right, and at the start of the campaign, we've already announced significant business support, significant parliamentary support, and we will have significant public support. I think we can build on that and actually make the case, particularly on trade, on the economy and the cost, that actually this is how we're going to win the referendum, and that the safer option would be actually to vote Leave.
You must be rubbing your hands at the moment with all this. Well, I say it's chaos at the moment. Obviously, Robert would say differently, but certainly rival campaigns saying the same thing.
Absolutely, and I think if you're asking people to leave, I think you have to be clear about what out would look like. So we have two different campaigns you haven't really explained. So I think you've been busy saying, here are all our donors, this is what our campaign is, please, Electoral Commission, designate us as the official campaign. And you have Aaron Banks doing the same on his side. But the real question is, what is out? And I'm still waiting to hear what that is. And I think the real challenge for you is that your case is the economic one. You want to say, this is what it means for the country and we can go and be part of the rest of the world, whereas Aaron Banks is talking about immigration. And actually both of those are wrong. You're making out this point that we can just leave the EU, every single penny of that contribution we don't have to spend on anything to do with the EU, but in order to retain our access to the single market, which is the largest market in the world, which we currently benefit from, we have to contribute financially. Norway, who is one of the models that some of the people in your campaign and other places point to, they contribute 80% per head of what the UK does in order to access that single market.
Two things. I know Lucy's desperate to try and portray the Norway model because they think that that's the argument they can have. Firstly, well, those people in the Norway model, they're quite happy about it. The public actually continue to vote to keep it.
The Norwegian Europe Minister in January said,
let's
just be very clear on that. The Norwegian Foreign Minister might have said that, but the public in Norway, those the voters, the people you listen to, are very happy. But I don't think this is about the merits of the Norway model. I think that, were Britain to leave the EU, which is the safer option given that you've got all the integration going on in the Eurozone, you're going to have a Eurozone treasury, a Eurozone finance minister, and we're going to be outvoted. That actually the idea that Britain wouldn't be able to have friendly relations with a free trade deal with, we are EU's largest market itself. I think that's absurd, and this kind of thing that we have to desperately cling on to what we know because we're so scared of actually taking our place in the globe and actually focusing on a global economy rather than just a regional one. I don't think that's a positive message.
Well, lots of people looking at the EU at the moment would say it's in chaos. It's beginning to disintegrate under the burden of the migrant crisis, the very thing that really should have tested its effectiveness, if you like. So what does in look like?
Well, in is absolutely the sort of arm's length, flexible relationship that we currently have. Let's just remember, we have opt-outs from the euro, from Schengen, which is the passport-free area, from several justice and home affairs measures. We get our own special rebate. There's a special protection for non-Eurozone members when we're voting in the European Banking Authority.
So no need for renegotiation at all in your mind?
Well, there can be much more to be done. It absolutely isn't perfect. But I think this idea that we are bound to go, either it's integrating further, as Robert says, or it's disintegrating, as you say. I mean, people have to pick one and decide whether we are bound to follow this further integration. But I just don't think we're going to have to. There's a real sign that the Prime Minister is going to be able to renegotiate our position on ever closer union. There's a part of the treaty, it's a bit arcane and boring, but it's a really important point that says the EU will sort of promote the ever closer union of peoples, and we will have an opt-out from that. And the crucial thing there is European Court of Justice decisions are sort of based around that text, so it will change the way decisions are made.
Right. I mean, is it a big problem for you that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't quite decided his view towards Britain's relationship with the European Union? Because broadly speaking, Labour leaders have supported the European Union and Britain staying within it. Can you actually win without the wholehearted, unified support of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party?
Well, actually, I think we do have that. So Alan Johnson is leading the Labour In campaign, and he has the full support of Jeremy Corbyn to do that and the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn made very clear at Labour Party conference that if there are things in the renegotiation that they don't like...
Doesn't want to give a blank cheque, though.
They will get into power and they will reverse them.
Right.
So that is the line. And absolutely, his position is different to perhaps some others, but that is not to say at all that he isn't in favour of remaining in. And why on earth, just were there to be some kind of renegotiation on working time or something, which doesn't look likely, why would you throw out all the existing benefits, paid maternity leave,
But would that be enough for someone like Jeremy Corbyn to say, we're not going to back the campaign to stay in if they do change the working directives?
Absolutely. I think the benefits are overwhelming, and I think he absolutely believes that too.
So this is the sort of real start, if you like, of the campaign and arguments. Do you think this is going to illuminate the public in terms of helping them make up their minds?
Look, it's hard work. I mean, as somebody who'd rather see Britain stay in the EU, I must say that the Roberts guys, whatever they're called, I'm losing track.
Vote Leave.
Whatever.
As opposed to leave.eu.
They're the ones I'm worried about, because UKIP has managed to tarnish its own case quite successfully over the last few years by bundling in leaving the EU with all kinds of things that many people in Britain aren't that fond of, a sort of anti-immigration voice, a slight whiff of reactionary xenophobia. These guys look like they're getting away from that. So as someone who wants to stay in the EU, that's an opponent I'd worry about. I think the bigger, wider political problem here that David Cameron has is that his strategy of kicking everything in the long grass with his slightly mythical renegotiation that nobody knows what failure or success looks like, that what it means is there's an argument developing without him, and he's going to have to come along at the end and join into it. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to work.
Do you agree that you are moving away from the UKIP or part of the UKIP-led campaign because you're worried about being tainted, if you like, with some of the arguments around immigration, which may be right or wrong?
Well, look, what I think is going to happen is if you look at the way people are going to vote on this issue, there are a third of people who are most likely to vote for Brexit no matter what, come what may. And I think a number of those do vote UKIP, and many of the arguments that UKIP put towards them appeal. There's also a third of people who I think are going to be on Lucy's side, and they're going to vote no matter what. But there is this vote in the middle. It's a third of people. And some of the arguments that are made about the fact that we've lost control of a democracy, about the fact that that we don't have control over migration policy, certainly appeal. But they have fears about the fact that we'll have friendly relations with the EU afterwards, and on the kind of jobs and living standards. Those are the key arguments that need to be tackled. And I think when you see that business is actually divided on this opinion, that there are plenty of entrepreneurs out there who are arguing that actually life outside of the EU is a chance to gain influence and prosper, I think that's going to be the key to winning the referendum.
We'll have you both on again, I'm sure. Thank you.